Last evening I was in a conversation with some friends, and it reminded me of something related to this gospel story, actually. In another world, in another life, I spent many very happy years serving at a very historic maritime radio station. They didn't play records, we didn't play records. We were listening for calls from ships, and the station handled telegram traffic from ships to shore, because cell phones don't go out too far, which is a good thing. And the station was in operation they're into their 115th year, I believe. It's operation, sort of. It's a historic landmark now. It's in a national park, but the station is still operated as it was in its day. And one of the tasks was to do something very simple, but actually quite challenging. And that was to listen on the distress wavelength and listen for ships calling in distress. Now, this never happened in my time there, and we wouldn't expect it to, right? As the saying goes, that ship sailed, right? Ships today have internet, and if the ship is sinking, they send an email, and they hope somebody answers it. I'm not convinced that's a good, I'm sure that's not a good system. And in fact, if you pay attention, you might remember the El Faro in Puerto Rico that got caught in a hurricane, and it sank, and all the people went with it. They relied on email. Big mistake. Why? Because on the other end of the line, there was always a human being listening, waiting, watching, not dependent on an internet connection. That's what made it so effective. Right? There was always somebody listening. And again, under the commercial era of that station, for almost 100 years, when it was making money, there was somebody there 24/7. Always. Through 2 world wars and everything in between. Right? And if you were there on the overnight shift and your replacement didn't come, you stayed until somebody else came. That's how important this was. And all it was about was listening and waiting and watching. And it was easy. But at this time of the year at night, it was really hard. Because if you ever tune your AM radio, who listens to AM radio anymore, right? But if you ever tune an AM radio around at night in the summertime, what do you hear? Static crashes. And that's what you listened to for how many hours you were there. Static, noise. But you were listening for the signal. And again, never came, but you listened and you watched. Again, I think that's a powerful metaphor for this gospel, right? Since the bridegroom was long delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. Right? In that line of work, if they caught you sleeping, you were fired. That was the end of your career. Right? And indeed, when we bring to our faith life, it seems, at least to us, who live in mortal time, right? We tend to forget that the universe is like, whatever it is, 14 billion years long, right? So we tend to measure things in my lifetime, right? Jesus has not come yet. And that could happen in the next millisecond, but based on past performance, probably not. But from the writings of Paul, we know Paul thought this was going to happen in his lifetime. He was wrong. And a lot of people have been waiting since. Right? One of the driving motivations of the Franciscan spiritual movement was the belief that the end of the world was going to come in 1266. It's a long story, don't ask. As we know, wrong. And there's no end to people, like the guys on the TV, or gals too now, right? Send me $50 and I'll tell you when the end of the world's going to be, right? We all know that lot, right? The Chicken Littles out there. Right? But the reality is, it doesn't matter, does it? When that day comes. When the day and the hour comes, it doesn't matter, right? Because one of two things are going to happen. I'm going to be here and see it, or I'm going to be in St. Stan's Cemetery, probably, right? Those are the choices. There's no third option. The day is coming, says the Lord. Right? The day is coming. And the day and the hour we do not know. Right? A lot of people woke up this morning who are now with the undertaker, right? We don't know. We just don't know. Which is probably a good thing, right? If somebody offered you the opportunity, I can tell you the day and the hour when you're going to croak, who would take that? Can you imagine what that would do to you? That would mess you up. It would me, at least. I don't know. I'm only speaking for myself, right? But the reality is that day and hour is coming. And what does the Lord call us to? Watching and waiting and staying awake, listening. Right? And the reality is, most of that listening is to noise. We live in a noisy world. It's getting noisier all the time. Right? And the more noise there is, electronics, the more noise there is, the harder it is to hear the signal that you want. Right? It's harder and harder to hear because the noise is everywhere. Right? Both literally and spiritually, you can say. We live in a noisy world. But the task set before us is to be faithful, to be watchful, to listen, to wait. Right? And not just hanging around. Right? The foolish virgins just hung around. The wise virgins were truly watching. They were ready. And that's the message too, isn't it? We don't know the day or the hour, but we need to be ready. Right? No matter when that happens. Right? We help out at St. Joseph's Nursing Home in Catonsville, commercial. But if you got to go to a nursing home, it's where you want to go, okay? We don't get a cut of that, okay? It's just an unsolicited, solicitation. It's a wonderful place. I think I got a lady there who's like going on 104, right? That lady's and she comes to Mass still, right? She's been waiting over 105 years probably now, if you think about it. Right? And then there are those whose life in this world is 5 minutes and everything in between. It's not our call. Well, it is in a certain sense. We're called to protect life, obviously, right? But in general, it's not our call. Right? But the point is to be ready, to be watchful, to listen, and not just to hang around, but to moment, because we don't know. We don't know. Stranger things have happened, right? And we ask the Lord to help us with that and help us to deal with the noise, right? The noise of the world, right? So that we can hear the signal, right? Because that day is coming. The Lord will call us, right? And if the noise is too great and the signal's a little weak, we might not hear it, right? We might not respond. So we ask the Lord to help us with that, to help us to be ready and always vigilant.